and Senior Mitchener. So that is the study author and uniform doctoral student. What are you laughing at? Someone says, we were rolling around in tears of laughter. Couldn't believe they were able to get away with saying moist so many times. I still don't get what's wrong, Gary, with having a moist piece of chocolate cake, as I'm going to do after the show.
It's too late for you, Wallace. Forget about it.
Kia ora to you both. I'm Wallace Chapman, and I'm back without these two tomorrow. See you then.
Thanks for having me.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, cop killer Eli Epiha is guilty on all counts after a harrowing wait and a divided jury. We have reaction from Constable Matthew Hunt's mum. A free pass to the Wallabies. The team gets an economic exemption to come here for the Bledisloe Cup. But it skates on. They've got to be here by Friday to avoid MIQ. So what do businesses struggling to get workers through the border make of that? Hundreds of Bulla residents are forced to find new homes or move out of the district. Something stinks on the North Shore. We investigate the rubbish charges dividing the super city, and Luca Jones is going for gold on the water. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The jury in the trial of police killer Eli Epiha has found him guilty of the attempted murder of the second constable after more than 11 hours of deliberation. Epiha admits murdering Constable Matthew Hunt and reckless driving causing injury, but denied he intended to kill Officer David Goldfinch when he opened fire. Katie Todd reports.
The verdicts came after a long day of deliberations in the High Court in Auckland. The jury initially told the judge it couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, and when asked for a majority verdict, advised it couldn't do that either. Eventually, it returned a guilty verdict for Epiha and then a guilty verdict for the accused getaway driver, Natalie Bracken, on a charge of accessory after the fact of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Epiha and Bracken are due to be sentenced on October 1st.
The mother of murdered police officer Matthew Hunt says the trial has been agonising. Speaking outside the High Court, Diane Hunt said the loss of her son was made all the more traumatic by having to listen to the detail of what happened to him and Constable David Goldfinch during the shooting in Massey.
The past 2+ weeks have been harrowing for all of us. Listening to what happened to Matthew and Dave in such raw detail on Friday, the 19th of June 2020, can't be described in words.
The Wallabies have been given permission to enter New Zealand without having to stay in managed isolation, meaning next week's Bledisloe match will go ahead. Cabinet ministers agreed last week to halt all quarantine-free travel with Australia as the country grapples with its COVID-19 outbreak. Here's our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch.
The exemption has been granted on economic grounds, with the Sports Minister Grant Robertson saying the match is worth up to $20 million in spending. He says the broadcast rights also provide much-needed income for the sport. The rugby players will take a charter flight from Queensland to Auckland on Friday morning. They've been operating in their own bubble and will all have to test negative for COVID-19 before leaving Australia. It means the Bledisloe Cup match can take place on August the 7th.
The Prime Minister says housing will be a critical issue for the Bulla district as it rebuilds from severe flooding. Jacinda Ardern has visited flood-hit Westport today, where 100 homes have been deemed unlivable. Another 400 have been yellow-stickered and will need major repairs. Ms Ardern says some temporary housing has already arrived, but it's not yet known how many people have been displaced. A first responder helping with the clean-up in Westport says there is still a lot of need in the community. The chairperson of Westport Land Search and Rescue, Sue Walsh, says she's been in the town for the past 12 days and many people need more than just practical help in the community.
There's a lot of needy people out there, and we are now finding people who have not come forward to get help. Neighbours are coming. We're finding people wrapped in a blanket. They don't know what to do. And we're also getting people coming here for just a little bit of TLC, as long as we feed them a cup of tea, chocolate biscuit, some soup, listen to them for a little bit, and that's helping them.
All Blacks and Highlanders loose forward Shannon Frizzell has been offered diversion and has apologised after being charged with assault. The 27-year-old has appeared in the Dunedin District Court accused of assaulting a woman in a bar. He has been remanded until the 21st of September for diversion to be completed. Speaking outside Dunedin District Court, Shannon Frizzell said he was sorry.
I especially like to say sorry to the two people involved and the harm I have caused. I let myself and others down, and I will now try to do everything I can to restore people faith in me.
Shannon Frizzell has been named in the All Blacks squad for the upcoming Bledisloe Cup against Australia. It's 4 minutes past 5. New Zealand heavyweight boxer David Nika has easily won his opening fight at the Tokyo Games, but the bout ended in controversy with his Moroccan opponent trying to bite him. Nika secured a unanimous points decision victory over Morocco's Younes Bala, but Bala tried to bite him in the closing stage of the fight. Nika told Sky it came as a shock.
I didn't think he'd get away with it, but he tried to bite my cheekbone. Luckily, though it was a little bit slippery, probably got a mouth of sweat, but he also had his mouth guard in, so yeah, no broken skin.
Rio Olympic silver medalist Luca Jones will soon continue her bid to go one better in Tokyo when she competes in the semi-finals of the canoe slalom in an hour's time. Jones was the third fastest qualifier in the heats and must finish inside the top 10 to advance to tonight's final. The All Blacks Sevens will play Canada in tonight's quarterfinals after finishing top of their pool with a 14-12 win over Australia. And the football Ferns have one last shot to leave the Tokyo Games Olympics with a victory. They've lost their first 2 group games to Australia and USA and now play unbeaten Sweden tonight. Meanwhile, the New Zealand men's hockey team have been held to a frustrating 2-2 draw with Japan. The New Zealand NBA basketball player Stephen Adams is reportedly switching teams. ESPN says Adams is moving from the New Orleans Pelicans to the Memphis Grizzlies as part of a trade. That's the news.
National asks for details on Suhaira Aiden's repatriation.
We should know exactly what the arrangements are for this woman coming back to our country.
While a counter-terrorism expert says no charges should be brought.
Until we get much more compelling evidence that she was involved in atrocities, she deserves safe haven in New Zealand.
And Jane Campion's new film generates Oscar buzz.
Ticks all those boxes of a major art house release that potentially could be in the running for Oscars.
One Take. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Occasional showers, some heavy, possible thunderstorms, easing and becoming isolated tonight. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wairarapa and Wellington, rain easing to showers tonight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers, clearing tonight. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, remaining showers clearing today and becoming fine. Bulla and Westland, often cloudy with a few showers. Otago and Southland, excluding Stewart Island, mostly fine. Cloud increasing tonight with scattered rain. Expect isolated evening showers inland tomorrow. Fiordland and Stewart Island, rain this evening. Possible thunderstorms, easing to a few showers tonight. And Chatham Islands, cloudy, rain developing towards the evening. RNZ National, it's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, e ho tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Cop killer Eli Epiha has been found guilty of the attempted murder of another officer, Constable David Goldfinch. Epiha pleaded guilty to the murder of Constable Matthew Hunt, who he shot dead in a West Auckland street in June last year. He denied the 4 shots he fired at Constable Goldfinch were designed to kill him. Today, a jury found him guilty. Our reporter Katie Todd has been covering the case and joins me now live in the studio. Katie, it was a bit of an excruciating wait for the verdict. So what was the reaction when it came in?
Just utter silence in court. There was no emotion shown by Epiha and by Matthew Hunt's family, who have been sitting through the entire trial. Some of them sort of held their hands to their mouths in shock, but there was no sort of outcry of emotion. However, outside court, Diane Hunt, Matthew Hunt's mother, had this to say.
The past 2+ weeks have been harrowing for all of us. Listening to what happened to Matthew and Dave in such raw detail on Friday, the 19th of June 2020, can't be described in words. The loss of Matt has been made all the more traumatic by having to hear every possible detail that happened that day. Our thoughts are with Dave and his family, and we would like to acknowledge his incredible courage. We would like to extend our sincere thoughts to the injured member of the public and his family who also became victims on this terrible day.
So that was Diane, Constable Matthew Hunt's mother, speaking outside court. What do we know about what was going on behind closed doors with the jury? There were some clues, questions they asked. So what can we piece together?
So this was the second day of deliberations. They retired to start considering their verdicts yesterday morning. It evidently wasn't really a straightforward process. They came back and asked to rewatch some of the videos shown as evidence. And then they asked for questions about the legal arguments. And then this afternoon, the jury advised Justice Venning it couldn't actually reach a verdict on the attempted murder charge, and that is a unanimous verdict where they all agree. And so he advised they'd need to reach a majority verdict where at least 11 of them were in agreement. They came back, said they couldn't reach a majority verdict, and then were advised to go back to the jury room and keep deliberating, see if they could reach it. And eventually, at about 3:30, we got news of a verdict.
Okay, so Epiha somewhat unusually gave evidence in this case. Can you just remind us of some of the things he said?
Yeah, pretty extraordinary comments from Epiha. So his defence was essentially he wasn't shooting to kill Goldfinch, and he claimed if he wanted to kill Constable Goldfinch, he would have. He says he was just shooting to scare him. Under cross-examination, he was asked why so many bullets, why 10 bullets shot at Constable Goldfinch. His answer was he can't say. He claimed he didn't actually know he'd hit Constable Goldfinch. He said that Goldfinch wasn't limping or staggering in any way. And then with Matthew Hunt's family sitting there in the trial, he basically said that Hunt was lying on the ground. He asked him for help, and Epiha said he considered that, he thought about taking Hunt to hospital and then decided not to.
So also in this situation, there was obviously a lot of video as well, because many people have cameras, so they take pictures, which brings us to the getaway driver, right, who has also been found guilty. Tell us about her and what the jury saw in relation to her.
Yes, so this is Natalie Bracken. Essentially, one of the key pieces of evidence was a mobile phone piece of footage taken from down the road. It showed Natalie Bracken in a silver Mazda driving Epiha away from the scene of the crime. And she took him to his friend's house. Basically, the Crown said that Natalie did not know Epiha, but her claim was that Epiha actually came up to her and threatened her with the gun, and she thought she was doing the right thing, taking him away from the scene, away from all the carnage, avoiding further bloodshed. Well, that's what her lawyer, Adam Couchman, said anyway. But the Crown said she was intentionally helping him avoid arrest. The next day when she was arrested herself, her hair had been dyed a different colour, and she told some lies in her evidence in a police interview that was played to the jury as well.
Thanks, Katie. Katie Todd there with all the reaction from the courtroom. As you would have heard, Eli Epiha, who killed Constable Matthew Hunt, has been found guilty of the other charges in relation to Constable Goldfinch, and we'll have more on this in the program. Now, the Police Commissioner has released a statement following the verdicts. Commissioner Andrew Costa says he wants to acknowledge the family and friends of Constable Matthew Hunt, particularly his mother Diane and sister Ali, who have spent 2 weeks listening to extremely painful and harrowing details of Matt's death. He says the guilty verdict for the attempted murder of Constable Dave Goldfinch is a relief for him and his family. Their journey to recover from what has happened continues, and the police will support them through this. The Commissioner says Dave has shown incredible strength throughout this process, particularly when he gave us evidence recounting what happened to him and Matt on the tragic day. He says the trial has been a brutal reminder of the inherent risks and potential danger that police officers face every day, and he's thanking staff for their commitment and continued bravery. It is 13 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai e haere aki nei, one super city but two sets of rubbish rules. A free pass for the Wallabies. The team's been granted an economic exemption to come to New Zealand for the Bledisloe Cup, but they need to be here by Friday to avoid MIQ. The Trans-Tasman bubble is frozen for at least 2 months. New Zealanders have the same window to come back, with anyone returning from New South Wales required to go into managed isolation. The Wallabies will avoid that because they've basically been in their own bubble in Queensland and will fly here on a charter. The government reckons the test match is worth between $17 to $20 million in spending for the host region, while broadcast rights are much needed income for the sport. But to use a sport analogy, the decision wasn't such a slam dunk on the streets of Auckland.
No, I don't agree with that. If it's shut for everybody, it should be shut for all people, not just selected people. That's my opinion anyway, short and sweet.
One rule for all.
One rule for all, absolutely, yes. Yeah, sure.
It's the only way to keep us safe.
Yeah.
You would agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Yes. Yeah. I dare not.
Excellent. Make it happen, yeah.
I think it's fair. If they can control it and manage it, not an issue. We've missed out a lot, so good to have them here.
I don't have a strong view on it, really. Provided we're all safe and secure, it's fine.
I think other people have a far greater right to come here than mere rugby players kicking a ball about.
You think if they're given the exemption, well, why can't people who are away from their families, that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
So I think it's in the benefit of the, New Zealand not to allow people to come in. Yeah.
I don't agree with that because I think that opening the borders is just more opportunity for corona to spread. I believe that we should be in lockdown for a lot longer, close the barriers, but yeah, I reckon another year or two, to be honest.
A lot of people have said, well, if you're going to let the Wallabies rugby team in, then you should let people in who are, separated from their families.
I think it shouldn't matter. I think it should just be cut off fully, to be honest. Just for now, anyway. Because I think it's just going to happen again and again and again until we figure out that's the way anyway. So, see how it goes, I guess.
It probably helped the economy a little bit, but then it might also help the economy because since everybody's a rugby fan and everything, so
you think if it's something that helps the economy, fair enough, that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay, but then at the same time there's other people struggling to come back, so if they want to make an exception, just make an exception with those people as well.
Well, joining me now is Export New Zealand's Executive Director, Catherine Beard. Kia ora, Catherine. So an economic exemption for the Wallabies, how does that sit with you?
Look, I think there'll be exporters and business people in New Zealand who are really disappointed with this decision. It seems very political and it seems like politically kind of picking winners or favourites. Really, the export sector is a $62 billion sector, so really that kind of money for rugby sort of pales into insignificance. And we've been trying for months and months and months to get quite critical workers in across the border, and also exporters the ability to get out to do critical things connected with the food supply chain, connected with medical technology. And honestly, it is so hard, and the MIQ system is pretty broken from our point of view.
So what do you think is political about it specifically? Where's the politics here?
Well, to just be able to turn that decision around in a couple of days really seems a little bit like a Wiggles take two. And so it sort of seems that, things can be made to happen quite quickly for sports stars and maybe for entertainers, but when it comes to business, and, this is critical. We've got people's jobs and whole lives riding on the investment they've made in businesses and building them up over the years. And we can't keep operating in a system where we're sort of got no way to safely get people in and out.
So do you think there's a double standard here, Catherine?
Well, it certainly looks like it. We've been trying for months to move the dial with MB officials. We've written letters to ministers. We've had incredibly worthy cases that we've put forward. I mean, one of them, for goodness sake, is a business that makes oxygen machines, that they've been needing to install in hospitals around the world. I mean, we went to no end of trouble for that company.
So do you think, rugby is given too much of a priority?
Well, it certainly seems like it. And the other thing that we're hearing is there's no MIQ spots going to be available until maybe December, and we've got a whole lot of room set aside, of course, for travelling home Olympians. So, sports is definitely up there.
Why do you think, then, if you believe or suspect there's a double standard for rugby and they're getting preferential treatment, why do you think that is? What's so special about rugby?
Gosh, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's a popular sport in New Zealand. That could have something to do with it. But, like I said, some of these businesses, they can potentially earn a lot of foreign exchange for New Zealand. We've got critical people that we need to get in to do critical jobs, and whole industry sectors are actually looking down the barrel of the next seasonal peak, wondering how they're going to get all the crops in and the fruit picked and processed. So, it's quite a stressful time.
So when you look at this, and you did mention the fact that this was approved within a few days, it was less than 3 working days, and they've got a green light to come in with this economic exemption. Can you give us an idea of how easy it is for the businesses that you deal with to get an exemption?
Oh, incredibly hard. The bar is incredibly high. And like I said, we've had cases that we think would stack up. I mean, one of the firms is doing post-harvest processing equipment internationally, and that is part of the food supply chain. Some of these companies are part of the medical supply chain. We've had Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade going out and leading New Zealand signing agreements with other countries to say, let's keep our supply chains open. But we can't actually get people across that border. We need an MIQ system that is transparent and accessible for business, critical business travel.
So there's 2 issues here, right? There's the first one of actually getting across the border. So the Wallabies get an economic exemption to do that, to actually pass into New Zealand. They don't have to do MIQ because they're outside of the danger zone as assessed. So when you talk about MIQ and the need for that, what does business specifically want? Do you want ring-fence spots in the existing quota for MIQ, or how could you be helped?
Yeah, we would like ring fence. So apparently there is 10% set aside for critical business travellers, but our problem is those business travellers have no way of accessing that 10%. So they need a route to go into MB or somewhere to put their request in. And at the moment they're just out there with the general public, sitting on those websites, hitting refresh and competing with the bots. And, people that are maybe travelling just to come home and be with family for Christmas, all sorts of reasons. So, it's really just, I think the business community's done pretty well to be this cut off for this long, but after 1.5 years, the cracks are really starting to appear.
So do you think that the government has made a mistake in rubber stamping this?
Well, if they can do this for a sports team, if we had half of that energy directed towards getting this channel for business travel, then I think that would go a long way to helping.
So, Catherine, I just want to be clear on this, because sports brings people joy, right? So the Olympics arguably give some people something to look forward to, their, amazing achievements. It's not that you're against, for example, the Wallabies per se coming here. You just want an equal crack at it.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. We do need to keep our spirits up in these tough times, and sport is a big part of that. And, they're running businesses as well, so, they have to cover their costs and keep their sponsors happy. But, yes, we just want equal opportunity. We want that set aside. We want to be able to access it and not be competing with every other person, because what you have to appreciate is that, some of these projects are super critical. They're big dollar projects, and, a whole business could be riding on that back in New Zealand, and that's a lot of employees and their livelihood.
Good to talk to you, Catherine. That's Catherine Baird, who's Export New Zealand's Chief Executive Director, rather. Homai o whakaaro, I'm really interested in your feedback on this one. So the Wallabies get an economic exemption. Are you cool with that? And what about business? Let us know your thoughts. The comments there being they wanted to be treated equally, but perhaps business should have some ring-fence spots in MIQ. And if it's good enough for the Wallabies, well, is it good enough for other businesses? Pātui mai, you can text me on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A senior cabinet minister expects Australia will be held to account on the international stage for its treatment of terror suspect Suhaira Aydin. Aydin and her 2 children will be deported to New Zealand from Turkey, where they've been held in detention since February. The case became New Zealand's responsibility after Australia stripped Aydin of her citizenship without any warning. And now the National Party is questioning whether the legislation that allowed Australia to do so should be introduced here. Here's political reporter Katie Scotcher.
Suhaira Aydin and her 2 children will soon arrive at our border. It's the first time a suspected Islamic State terrorist has been repatriated here. They've been held in detention in Turkey since February as officials have worked out what to do with the New Zealand-born woman.
Putting in place the arrangements both for getting her out of Turkey and bringing her to New Zealand and the arrangements for once she's back here. That has taken a huge amount of work and that has been going for some weeks.
That huge amount of work became New Zealand's responsibility after Australia quietly stripped Aydin of her citizenship. She was born in New Zealand but moved across the ditch when she was 6 and obtained dual citizenship. Aydin later travelled to Syria in 2014 on an Australian passport to join Islamic State. But an Australian law introduced in 2016 that automatically cancels the citizenship of a dual citizen when they've been engaged in terrorist activities forced responsibility for Aydin into New Zealand's hands. National's Foreign Affairs spokesperson Jerry Brownlee says it meant New Zealand had no choice but to accept Turkey's deportation request. He questions whether the situation could have been avoided.
Should we have had legislation similar to Australia that says that if you leave the country to join a terrorist organisation, you effectively abandon your citizenship?
The New Zealand government isn't interested in introducing similar legislation, according to Senior Cabinet Minister Andrew Little.
That potentially sets up a very ugly, brutal race between countries to strip citizenship of people they just don't want.
He describes Australia's law as unusual.
Australia will stand to account on the international stage for the approach that they have taken.
Karam Sha'ar, an expert on the Middle East, says a similar law shouldn't be introduced here.
We shouldn't be revoking people's citizenships because they misbehave or they do something wrong. Where else do they go? And what about Syria? Why should Syria be in charge of these people? There are thousands of them.
Security analyst Paul Buchanan says Australia's move to revoke Aydin's citizenship was reprehensible.
We don't want to go down that path, but they are our biggest ally. They are our most important partner. They have bigger fish to fry on the international scene, and unfortunately, we need them more than they need us when it comes to international coalition building against common enemies. So this was not a fight that we wanted to pick.
Paul Buchanan says the government is doing the best it can to respond to a situation that was dumped on its lap out of nowhere.
It is 27 minutes past 5. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's been more than 10 years since Auckland became a super city, but there's one smelly issue that still divides the city of sales: rubbish collection. Residents in several pockets of the city have to buy bin tags for collection day. The rest don't. One city, 2 rules. Why, you ask? Our reporter Louise Tanuth and cameraman Nick Munro hit the streets on Rubbish Day to get the skinny on the big stink.
It's the sound you hear once a week, early in the morning. A dreaded sound if you've forgotten to put your bins out. But in Waitakere, on the North Shore, in Papakura and in Franklin, there's an extra step. They need to buy a bin tag and stick it onto the handle before wheeling it out to the curb. Here on the North Shore for this particular street, Tuesday means bin day. For this particular 120 litre bin, you need a rubbish tag like this. For this orange tag, it'll set you back $4.10. Smaller bins, which are 80 litres, you need a blue tag, $2.80. And for a 240 litre bin, you need a green tag, which is $5.90. You need to buy these from the supermarket, and no tag, no bin collection. People in bin tag zone need to buy a new tag for their bin collection each week. That means swinging by the local store, library, service centre or supermarket. But a quick trip over the harbour bridge and we're in no bin tag country. Here on the other side of the bridge, it's a much different story. Bins here don't need any tags. They pay a flat rate on their rates bill. For an 80 litre bin like this one, it's about $150 a year. So on the city side of the bridge, the cost is included in your rates and is based on how big your bin is. Back on the North Shore, we eventually bumped into the rubbish bin on its early morning pickup. And we met Jared and Sandeep. Jared's job is to run ahead of the truck, ripping the tags off the bins, then Sandeep follows, to tip the bin bits into the truck. If it's the wrong colour, it gets stickered by Jared.
So these are the stickers that we put on the bins. Yeah. So if it's like, say for instance, like obviously I said it's a green tag, so here it should say either had no tag or it had a wrong colour tag.
Right, so that's their lesson for next time?
Yeah.
Yeah, but do you still collect it if it's wrong?
No.
Right.
So we just leave the bin and that's it, and we just carry on to the next one.
It's an extra step for him on bin collection day in these parts of Auckland, but he takes it in his stride. Pretty exhausting going around the whole area?
Oh, it can be, but it's just nice and fit, hard work, easy work.
Janine lives in the area. She says the bin tag system's got to go.
Oh, I just think it's useless. Yeah, waste of time. We have to, if you forget, you have to go to the supermarket late at night on a Sunday or whenever it is and get the tag. And then if you get in the morning, you've got your bin for a week. It just doesn't work.
Prefer to just have it in your rates bill?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That would just make it a breeze.
Northcote local Jonathan Erickson boycotts the sticker system in favour of buying bags.
We like the discipline of being able to control the process, but we actually tend to use the yellow bags instead because you don't have to have a sticker on those.
He admits the tags are an extra step, but says it makes people think twice about their waste.
I don't mind a little bit of a nuisance value when it's getting us to think more about, should we throw lots of rubbish out every week?
So why are there still two systems operating in one super city? General Manager for Waste Solutions at Auckland Council, Parul Sud, agrees one system would be better.
Definitely, the intention is to go to one system. And you can imagine historically we had the 7 cities and they all had different ways of doing things. We've actually moved from having bags in some areas to actually have 2 bins all over the city. So we are making progress, but the way you pay for the service still has to be sorted out.
Checkpoint tallied up the costs, and assuming you're putting your bin out every week, bin tags work out to be more expensive. So if you're putting a 120 litre bin out every week, you're paying $63 more a year. And if you're putting the 240 litre bin out every week, you're paying $86 more a year. But Parul Sud thinks the tag system makes people more conscious of their waste.
So you're more conscious in terms of saying, I need to buy my tag, and it's a cost. And that's what it's probably putting it in your mind going, that's a cost I need to think about. Can I actually divert the waste that's in the bin and do something else with it rather than putting it out for collection?
So is there any evidence to prove it works?
So we are looking at the evidence to tell us whether this system is currently achieving what it's supposed to achieve. And that is something we'll take back to our politicians, elected members, to see whether we need to go towards rates, keep what we've got, or move towards a user-based model for the entire region.
But there's no clear indication when they'll make a decision.
That work for the policy is being done now, and we are looking to have something coming in the next 6 months. If we are to change what we are doing, that will have to go out for consultation and ask Aucklanders what would they prefer. So that should come out with the Auckland plan next year.
So Aucklanders will have to wait to have their say on which system they think should be binned.
E te iwi e haere ake nei e a checkpoint. Hundreds of Bulla residents are having to find new homes or move out of the district. COVID cases soar in Fiji, almost 1,300 cases in the last 24 hours. And we speak to the police union about the Epiha verdicts. Homai o whakaro, we'd love your feedback. I need to tell you that rubbish story has caused a bit of a stink in the office, excuse the pun, so we'd love to hear your opinions on that. One super city and a couple of systems. If you live on the shore, West Auckland, you have to pay for a tag for your rubbish collection. Is that fair? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And if the system's going to change, what should it change to? It is time for the headlines now, so ko Susana anō tēnei.
Kia ora, Lisa. The Police Association believes the verdict finding Eli Epiha guilty of the attempted murder of Constable David Goldfinch tells police they are valued. Epiha has already admitted murdering Constable Matthew Hunt during the shooting in West Auckland in June 2020. The jury in the High Court at Auckland initially indicated it couldn't reach a unanimous or majority verdict on the charge of attempted murder in relation to Constable Goldfinch. However, after more than 11 hours of deliberation, it returned a guilty verdict. Co-defendant Natalie Bracken was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and of wounding Mr Hunt. Next week's Bledisloe match at Eden Park will go ahead as the Wallabies are granted permission on economic grounds to enter New Zealand without having to go into managed isolation. The Sports Minister Grant Robertson says the tests are estimated to be worth up to $20 million in spending to the hosting region, plus broadcasting rights. Meanwhile, Shannon Frizzell has been named in the All Blacks squad for the Bledisloe match after appearing in the District Court in Dunedin today. The 27-year-old was accused of assaulting a woman in a bar. He has apologised and has been offered diversion. The Prime Minister says it's not yet known how many Westport residents have been displaced by the recent devastating floods. Jacinda Ardern has visited the West Coast town today to see the damage firsthand. She says while some temporary homes have already arrived, housing will be a critical issue for the Bulla district as it rebuilds. Around 100 homes have been declared unlivable. No further traces of the coronavirus have been detected in New Plymouth's wastewater. However, daily sampling will continue for the next week. The Ministry of Health has reported one new COVID-19 case in managed isolation today. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Kia ora rā, Susana. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa anai nei, ko Nona Peltier, who's in the studio to talk all things business. Shall we kick off with Fonterra? What's going on there?
Yeah, they're going to be converting their coal-fired facilities to alternative renewable fuels. In this case, they're going to use wood pellets. And the one they announced today was the Sterling cheese plant in Otago. And
I was just going to say, what are they using the coal for? In production of what?
So cheese. So they use it, believe it or not, to create steam. So right now they use a coal boiler, and in the south that's primarily what they're using. They have 8 units at 8 facilities that they still have to convert, but the Sterling unit's going to be converted by August next year, and it will be using these wood pellets instead of coal, which is still going to produce a hot enough fire, so to speak, to fire up these boilers, which produce steam, which is used in the production of cheese. Did you know that?
No. So I've learned something. Thank you.
Yeah, I learned that today as well. So that's what they're going to be doing with it, making steam and cheese.
Okay, let's go to government data indicating that many hotels are finding it tough to keep the lights on. Well, that's no surprise, is it?
Not really. So MB came up, this is the Ministry of Business and Innovation and Enterprise, those folks. They came up with this data series about 13 months ago where they started to look at how hotels were coping with the COVID shutdowns and so on. And what they found was 11% of what we call our core accommodation was either closed or had no guests last month. That's quite a big number again, 1 out of 10 or a little bit more.
Unless they're on the MIQ train, there's really not much on the offer, is there?
Even then, the occupancy rate was 42% over the year for all hotels. And of that, 93% of those people that were staying as guests were domestic travelers, not international. But it shows that even with that high number of guests, domestic travelers, at 42%, it's not viable. I was talking to the head of the hotel council. He said that big hotels need to have at least 70% occupancy if they're going to even break even because of the staff and all that's involved. So this is going to be a big problem for the hotel industry because right now there's no certainty. And what they would like is to be treated more like an airport or an airline with some conversations with government about what happens. So, for example, when we get to a vaccination rate of, say, 80%, what happens then? Do we open the border? Do the hotels, when do they start marketing? He said, it's not a matter of like, okay, we're going next week, because with hotels, you have to bring on all that additional staff. You have to do marketing. You have to take bookings. It's not just a matter of flicking on a switch or just completely advertising something tomorrow. He said the industry can't respond like that. It's just too big, and the infrastructure that goes into it is too complex. So, yeah, it's a big issue, and they're wanting a conversation with the government. They're saying we need to be included in the conversations. You can't just keep us out like that. And in the meantime, it's certainly not a good sign for the industry. He's saying that if we are going to have a domestic tourism industry, we are going to need far fewer hotels.
Interesting. Hey, Nona, let's make like slalom canoeists at the Olympics and navigate our way around the markets.
That sounds really exciting. Okay.
It's going to be, Nona.
Okay, well, we fell 0.2%. That's our NZX Top 50 Index. That was an 83-point drop to 12,590, and that was in line with what we saw in Asia. Looking ahead, we're going to be waiting for what the Federal Reserve says in the United States about interest rates. That's coming up in the next couple of days. And our dollar is steady at 69.9 US cents and 94.8 Australian. And 50.6 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Paltio with Business. Luca Jones is hitting the white water shortly in the semi-finals of the canoe slalom at the Tokyo Games. Before heading off, Luca had to farm out her beloved chickens to some happy homes to make sure they're well cared for while she's away. Luca's mum, Denise, joins me now from the Bay of Plenty. Hi, Denise. Where are the chooks right now?
Hello. The chooks, well, hopefully they're snuggled up somewhere warm because the weather's not that good out here in Athenry, but I'm sure they'll be cosy somewhere. Just down the road.
What are their names, Denise?
Helen and Debbie are the ones that are just down the road from us here.
So they're not lined up, sitting on your lap, waiting for the big race then?
No, didn't have any chicken diapers for that. So
Where are the others? Where are the others? Because there's half a dozen, isn't there?
Yes, there's quite a few others, but they're all dotted around with other people. So the main one, Helen and Debbie, which are the ones that appear in most of the photos, are just down the road at some lovely people's place.
Okay, so if the chooks aren't there, who is lined up?
So lined up, we have 3 sisters and the mum. Yeah, there's the sisters. And we've got 2 of Luca's wee nieces and a nephew, and a few brother-in-laws, and myself and Steve. So, yes, we're all waiting, watching all these ones going first. So,
gosh,
it's a bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I bet. So how are you dealing with the nerves? What preparations have you made?
We've got lots of food, and we've got lots of wine, and we've got the bubbles in the fridge as well to open in case of emergency.
Yeah, tell me about that emergency bottle of champers. Tell me the backstory.
Okay, so Luca gave that to us a couple of years ago, and she gave us some life jackets as well because she was very concerned as Steve and I got new kayaks for Christmas, and she was concerned that we might not be able to cope with the water in the kayaks like she does. So we got the life jackets and the emergency bottle of champagne to take out with us just in case. So I thought, well, I'm going to save that for a special occasion. And so the special occasion is today.
I understand it's got a label on it that says break to calm nerves.
That's the one, yes.
Will that be required, Denise, for your nerves?
That will definitely be required. The nerves are just, running high. So we've got the semis on at the moment. So we've got the nerves for the semis, and then the qualifications, the top 10 for the semis. Then there'll be nerves for the final.
Yeah, because it is, I mean, it's all riding on this. It's a big deal. There's all the hard graft that's gone into it, and it all comes down to this, doesn't it, Denise?
It does, yes. Comes down to all those seconds that are zooming by and those gates that they have to get through and the water that they have to negotiate. So there's a lot riding on it. So, yes. And they only get one run in the semis. In the heats, they got 2 runs, but the semis, they only get 1 run, 1 chance.
Give us a sense of what Luca has put into this.
She's been just absolutely amazing since she was 11 years old and had the dream to make it to the Olympics. And this is her 4th Olympics, so she's achieved that dream, but also the dream was for the medals as well. She just perseveres. She's through highs and lows. She certainly had a lot of lows, but she picks herself up and she just keeps going. So that's what I'm so proud of. In fact, her whole family is just so proud of her perseverance with a capital P. That's our Luca. She never gives up.
Denise, if we could just go back to the chooks for a minute, right?
The chooks, yes.
The chooks. She didn't want an update on the chooks, did she? Because she was a bit nervy. She didn't want to know what their fate was while she was prepping.
No.
Denise, if you had an update on the chooks?
I sent the video of Luca's interview talking about the chooks to the people looking after them, and they sent me back a thumbs up. So that's the only update I've had, so I'm taking that as good news.
I wonder if the video was played to the chooks so that they could hear their mum.
Possibly. Luca did want me to go down and FaceTime Helen for her, but I said no, not for a wee while.
Oh, that's a lost opportunity, Denise, not FaceTiming with the chooks. Now, just before we go, I mean, how are you at watching her races? Are you sort of, you know...
I'm a mess. We're all a mess. But, you know, that's what you do, yeah. A few more glasses of wine to calm our nerves and, yeah, should be all good. I mean, it's just amazing sport to watch, so making the most of it. But definitely nervous.
I bet. Well, best of luck to the whānau and to Luca. Denise, really appreciate your time and good luck with the emergency bottle of champers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you. Bye.
That's Denise Jones, Luca Jones's mother, who is racing this evening and actually starting around 6 o'clock. I'm just seeing here, about 6. I'm getting the thumbs up from the control room. 5:45, so the countdown is well and truly on. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Hey, Muriaki na Pita Pita Kōrero. After the news at 6, we'll go live to Tokyo to check in on how Luca Jones is going in that canoe slalom semi-final. The suffering continues in Fiji as COVID-19 cases soar amid its worsening health crisis. Close to 1,300 cases have been recorded in the last 24 hours, resulting in new curfew hours for the nation's main island of Veti-Levu. It says Jacinda Ardern says she can't influence the Fijian government to go into lockdown. Alicia Foon has the details.
A nation in crisis, with no end in sight. COVID-19 cases in Fiji are escalating, and so is the suffering. There have been a record 1,285 cases in the last 24 hours, and 9 more deaths in the last 4 days. COVID patients are spilling out of hospitals, schools and churches, with symptomatic people being told to stay at home. Sashi Kiran, director of Friend, an NGO in Fiji, says people are heavily relying on groups like hers for food and medicine.
There's a lot more exposure because people are encouraged to get out and about for economic activities. We probably need to really shut down for a couple of weeks. We've lost young people. We have lost a lot of senior citizens, and it's very tragic. Everybody in Fiji now knows somebody who's died of COVID.
Fiji now has more than 18,000 active cases in isolation and 195 deaths. 193 of them from the latest outbreak. But the death toll and some of those figures are being questioned. 101 deaths have been linked to pre-existing medical conditions, despite them having COVID. Meanwhile, another local providing support to frontline workers is Social Empowerment Education Program Director Chantal Khan. She says the suffering is tragic.
I live right near the main road, and we count now the number of ambulances that run past the house every day, and you're looking at about 8 to 10 a day going in this direction, and your heart just breaks because someone's grandparent, someone's elder is being taken and rushed to the, FAMAT centres at the moment, and it's really devastating.
Hundreds of food packs have been going to vulnerable people thanks to the generosity of New Zealanders.
We also have very kind donations coming in from several places, including New Zealand, and we want to thank the New Zealand community that have sent funds for ration packs. There's a lot of potential for gaps to be opened up. So marginalised vulnerable groups, the elderly, the disabled, they fall through the gaps. So we try to make sure that we're catching as many as we can.
Here in Aotearoa, President of the Fiji Goodmit Foundation, Krish Naidu, has also sent thousands of dollars worth of food parcels to Fiji. He says it's taking a toll on people's well-being.
There is a humanitarian crisis of food in Fiji, where people are really struggling. Hence why maybe some people are moving about looking for food due to COVID, borders being closed, and not everyone is getting the government financial support. But at the same time, we're also worried about the level of mental health issues our people are facing back home. We are aware of a number of suicides that have happened recently. So we're just telling people, that support each other, and we're also doing our best to support them from here.
Despite calls for a lockdown, the Fiji government are adamant on focusing on vaccinations and keeping the economy afloat. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she cannot influence Fiji's response, but can only offer support.
Ultimately, as with any nation, it's up to the political leaders to decide how they wish to respond to a COVID outbreak. Same for New Zealand, same for any country. Of course, we are here and ready and willing to offer any support or advice that we may have had from our experience.
In a statement today, the Ministry of Health said it's aware of the demand on health services in Fiji and will be looking to see how they can provide assistance. A spokesperson says discussions are underway about the possible air transfer of a patient requiring hospital-level care. No formal request has been received by them at this stage.
Cop killer Eli Epiha did try to kill a second officer the day he shot dead Constable Matthew Hunt, according to a jury at his High Court trial. The jury found him guilty of the attempted murder of Constable David Goldfinch, who he shot 4 times on a street in West Auckland last year. Outside court, Matthew Hunt's mother, Diane Hunt, said it had been harrowing, listening to the evidence over the past 2 weeks.
Well, this Friday will mark Matthew's 30th birthday. We miss him terribly. We hope that no other police family will ever have to go through this. And I just want to thank all of Matthew's friends and their families for all their enormous support of us. And Matthew loved them and I loved them as much as he did.
Chris Cahill is the president of the Police Association and joins me now. Kia ora, Chris. That must have been an excruciating wait. And I'm just wondering, given the evidence and the recordings and what was placed before the court, can you actually conceive of the machinations that this jury went through to reach these verdicts?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yeah, look, you do wonder when you sit back and you look at the video footage and you listen to the evidence of Dave Goldfinch. But what I have learned, juries generally do a damn good job of actually weighing up all the evidence. And we know from history of juries, one of the hardest offences to understand is that of attempted murder, because you've got to get into the mind of the offender. So, look, I just congratulate them for the big effort they've put in to come up with what we obviously believe is the right verdict.
I mean, it's obviously bittersweet. It doesn't bring anyone back. And I'm just wondering, how are your officers dealing with this?
Yeah, no, you did right. It's another little bit of closure, but it doesn't really bring anyone back. I mean, it does send a message that they're valued and that, this jury's spoken for the whole of New Zealand in a way to say that we won't allow someone to carry on like that and not hold them to account. So that actually does send a positive message, but they've still got to go to work today knowing that Matthew's died. His family is obviously still feeling it, and Dave will certainly, I think he gave amazing evidence, but it'll certainly still be something that he will always have to live with.
Yeah, can we talk about Constable David Goldfinch? And he obviously was at the trial. He had to face the man that had killed his work colleague and tried to kill him and give his evidence in that same room. What would you like to say about him?
Well, I was very proud of him. I mean, I think the fact if you saw it, he walked in, he looked at that offender straight in the eye, and he said, "Now's my day. Now's when I have my say for what you did to me." And he got up and he did it, and I thought he did it incredibly well. And hard though it would have been, to a degree, that's also part of that healing process as well.
Is he back at work yet?
Not fully back at work yet. There's a lot of process to go through, and it's not just him. He's got to work through with his family as well, of course. So a slow integration is better than just rushing these things.
Yeah. Hey, the level of violence here, the scale of it is pretty difficult to comprehend. What is happening here, Chris? Do you think generally are police actually targets?
Well, I think on this day they were. I mean, not saying that that's what he set out to do, but once he saw those police officers, it's pretty clear from the evidence in my mind that was given in the video footage that we saw and heard that he decided that he was going to kill these officers. It's hard to understand why someone would go from simply being in trouble for driving or maybe unlawful possession of a firearm to wanting to kill someone. He's the only one that can really explain what went through his mind that day.
And when you listened to his evidence, when you heard him say things like, well, he thought about putting Matthew Hunt in a vehicle and taking him to hospital, he was practising mindfulness. I mean, what did you make of the evidence you heard from him?
I just thought it was a case of someone who won't accept the responsibility for what they've done. To me, it was trying to move and shift the blame and make excuses. There's only one person responsible for what happened that day, and that's him, and he needs to face up to that.
What needs to happen now, Chris?
Well, we'll be very interested to see the message the judge sends. I think it's important that the damage that has been done to New Zealand is recognised in the sense it's not just a police officer's life lost, but there's innocence taken out of New Zealand every time law enforcement is attacked in this way. It actually is an attack on the whole of New Zealand. So we'd be expecting a significant sentence that will really show the effects that that's had.
And on a more broad look, Chris, how do you keep officers safe? Do they need any more tools? What are they?
Well, that's the big debate at the moment. Without a doubt, there's a significant number of our members feel that they need a gun on their hip. I will say, and I support the Commissioner in that, he's been more proactive in looking at what we can do to try and make officers safe since this incident, and he's still looking at things, and we're working with him. But without a doubt, that whole debate is still there that has to be addressed. What is the safest you can do to keep officers? Is it a gun on the hip, or is it specialist patrols back on the street? And we think, firstly, the one that can happen quicker is get those specialist, highly trained officers out on the street so they can attend the most high-risk incidents.
All the best, Chris. Really appreciate your time today. That is Chris Cahill, the President of the Police Association. Principals and teachers say training teachers to stamp out racism is essential for improving the school system. They say some teachers find the lessons confronting. Cultural capability is one of 3 priorities for teacher training this year, and the Education Ministry is also rolling out Te Huri Hanganui, a $48 million scheme, billed as a game changer for the way schools work. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
Hastings Girls High School has been tackling systemic racism for the past 4 years. The school's principal, Catherine Bentley, says the work can be challenging.
Absolutely confronting, because you don't know what you don't know, and then as soon as you do know, I mean, for me personally, as soon as I have that awareness, I can't just leave it sit and rest. People talk a lot about, unconscious bias and things like that, but, you can only be unconscious, that can only happen once, and then it's a conscious decision.
She says the school has made changes such as abolishing streaming and including Pacific and Māori taonga, moko and clothing in the school's uniform. She says achievement is improving and the school's Māori and Pacific girls are growing in confidence.
If we look at pass rates and we look at the quality of pass rate for our Māori and Pacifica, you can see it, huge changes. But that's just one tiny, narrow lens. How about look at the girls when they're standing on stage and they're performing in kapa haka? See that they're so firm in their identity now and so proud of who they are that they're unstoppable.
Such efforts are gathering steam. More than 300 schools and groups of schools have requested Education Ministry funding for cultural capability courses this year. In addition, the Ministry is working in 6 regions to introduce Te Huri Hanganui, a program that tackles racism and builds recognition of Māori culture and connections with Māori communities. Mana College in Porirua is in the scheme, and its head of maths, Caitlin Soulsby, says it will help teachers understand what they need to change and why.
I have had a white privileged background. I haven't been disadvantaged because of the colour of my skin, but I'm able to say that and I'm comfortable with that. Whereas when you start putting that with people that haven't had the time to explore that, they perhaps haven't had the time to spend time on mid-eyes, learn about different cultures, it's a really hard thing to say, hey, we need to change your teaching practice.
The president of Te Akatea, the Māori Principals Association, Bruce Jepson, says programs like Te Huri Hanganui are important, and it's clear that some teachers need them.
I wouldn't say that I encounter pushback, but I would say I come across those attitudes. More than anything, all it does is reinforce the necessity. It necessitates the need for this kaupapa.
He has a blunt message for those who don't want to engage.
I think all principals and all educators need to take this seriously. Probably, if we're not prepared to take this seriously, we should be thinking about another profession.
Bruce Jepson says the courses are part of a growing recognition that schools need to tackle the inequities behind Māori underachievement.
Right, let's get to some of your feedback before the news at 6. On the Wallabies, they've been granted an economic exemption. So that means they can come to New Zealand for the Bledisloe Cup, but they've got to get their skates on. They've got to be here by Friday. This person says, I doubt the Bledisloe game is actually worth the value that's proposed. No international tourism will be generated. So the money that is spent is money that's already on shore, i.e. already in our economy, just repurposed for the game. Yeah, the Sports Minister says up to $20 million for one test game, spending that goes into the community. Another listener says, let the rugby players in with caveats around safety. We all love a good game and the crowd isn't in the scrum, but please keep places for business travel, real business travel. We all rely on these people and their contribution, and there is a small window to be out and earn while other countries sort themselves out. We need them. Another person says the economics of the rugby union appears to be more urgent than the well-being of New Zealand. And Gerald says, hi, I don't think special exemption should be offered for sports teams. There are much more important needs for essential industry and people with a real need to get back to New Zealand. On the subject of rubbish, Tau Henaday's been in touch. Says the bin tags are bullshit. My rubbish is the same as theirs.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Lei Atawa tēnei. The Police Commissioner says Matthew Hunt's family has shown immense strength as they've had to hear the details of their son's murder. Eli Epiha was today found guilty of the attempted murder of Mr Hunt's colleague David Goldfinch, after earlier pleading guilty to Mr Hunt's murder. Andrew Costa paid tribute to Mr Hunt's family, particularly his mother Diane and sister Ellie, who have sat through the trial in the midst of their grief. He says the trial has been a brutal reminder of the risks and danger police officers face every day, and he's proud of the work they do. Epiha's getaway driver Natalie Bracken has also been found guilty of helping, having driven him away after the fact. Speaking outside the High Court at Auckland, Diane Hunt said the family have had incredible support and kindness shown to them.
This Friday will mark Matthew's 30th birthday. We miss him terribly. We hope that no other police family will ever have to go through this.
Diane Hunt also extended her thoughts to a member of the public injured during the shooting. The Prime Minister says housing will be a critical issue for the Bulla district as it rebuilds from severe flooding. Jacinda Ardern has visited flood-hit Westport today, where 100 homes have been deemed unlivable. She says some temporary housing has already arrived, but it's not yet known how many people have been displaced.
Obviously, we know the number of houses that are red stickered. Some of those yellow stickered homes are still working through whether or not they are uninhabitable for long periods of time, the level of water damage and the health risk that it presents. So I imagine over the coming days we'll get a better sense of what that housing gap is.
Around 400 homes in Westport have been yellow stickered and will need major repairs before residents can return. Export New Zealand is disappointed that the Wallabies have been granted MIQ exemptions. Executive Director Catherine Baird has told Checkpoint exporters have been trying for months to get critical workers in and going out for businesses, but have been restricted by border rules. She says the MIQ system is broken. The Australian rugby team will not have to spend time in MIQ, meaning the Bledisloe Cup match can go ahead in Auckland on August the 7th. All quarantine-free travel with Australia is being halted for 8 weeks as the country grapples with the COVID-19 outbreak. The exemption for the Wallabies has been granted on economic grounds. Principals and teachers say courses on racism and unconscious bias are confronting but necessary. They say the training will help fix underachievement by Māori students. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Cultural capability is one of 3 priorities for teacher training this year, and the Education Ministry says more than 300 schools and groups of schools have applied for funding for such courses. In addition, the Ministry is rolling out Te Huri Hanganui, a scheme aimed at tackling racism and accelerating Māori achievement. Principals have told RNZ the courses help teachers understand what they need to change and why. They say schools need to remove systemic racism from such things as their choice of curriculum resources and the way they allocate students to classes.
The minister responsible for the country's spy agency says measures to protect the public from a New Zealand-born woman with links to ISIS will be in place as long as she poses a risk. Suhaira Aden and her 2 children are repatriated from Turkey to New Zealand. Andrew Little says there are extensive plans in place to address the potential security risk she poses and plans to support her children.
The authorities will do whatever they can within the bounds of the law. So I think it is accepted there is a risk associated with her, so measures will have to be put in place to deal with those risks. They will be in place as long as needed to mitigate any risk to the community.
The details of the plan, including when the family will arrive, will not be made public. A Pacific survivor of the Lake Alice Child and Adolescent Unit in the 1970s has called for all people looking after young people in care to be fully screened before being put in charge of children. Leota Scanlon has given evidence to the inquiry into abuse in care. Sent to Lake Alice at 13, he was subjected to abuse, including injections of the sedative paraldehyde and electric shocks. He's worried not much has changed.
What's happening to us then is happening now, but in a different way with other carers. They need to be screened, they need to, be able to support these kids, young teenagers, young kids, so they don't go to places where, it's not good.
Leota Scanlon says children need to feel important and not made to feel dumb, as he was at Lake Alice. It's 5 minutes past 6. The New Zealand under-24 men's football team has suffered a major setback ahead of their final pool match at the Tokyo Olympics. Captain Winston Reid has been ruled out of tomorrow's match against Romania with injury. Ollie White's coach Danny Hayes says Reid will still play a major role in the lead-up to the game.
The fact that we haven't got him on the field is one thing, but, the reality is we've still got him inside camp and he's still going to be incredibly influential.
The Ollie Whites will advance to the quarterfinals for the first time if they beat Romania. The New Zealand heavyweight boxer David Nika has easily won his opening fight at the Tokyo Olympics, but the bout ended in controversy with his Moroccan opponent trying to bite him in the closing stages of the fight. Nika gained a unanimous points decision victory over Morocco's Younes Baal to advance to Friday's quarterfinals. Rio silver medalist Luca Jones is about to start her K1 canoe slalom semi-final. Jones was the third fastest qualifier in the heats and must finish inside the top 10 to advance to tonight's final. The All Black Sevens will play Canada in tonight's quarterfinals, while the Football Ferns are also in action with one last chance to leave Tokyo with a win. They've lost their first 2 games to Australia and USA and play unbeaten Sweden tonight. And women's world tennis number 2 Naomi Osaka has been beaten in straight sets in the third round of the women's singles in Tokyo. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp samples the latest album from singer, songwriter, public transport enthusiast and whanganui lift operator Anthony Tonnen. We've got a Smart Talk discussion on the future of art and art's gatekeepers. And our linguist, Dr. Julia de Bress, picks apart the language we use around disability, the words we use to describe it, and the words the disabled use themselves, on Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Occasional showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms, easing and becoming isolated this evening. Horowhenua, Kapiti Coast, Wairarapa and Wellington. Rain easing to showers tonight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers clearing tonight. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, remaining showers clearing today and becoming fine. Bulla and Westland, often cloudy, a few showers. Otago and Southland, excluding Stewart Island, mostly fine. Cloud increasing tonight with scattered rain. Expect isolated afternoon and evening showers inland tomorrow. For Fiordland and Stewart Island, rain tonight, possible thunderstorms, easing to a few showers. Chatham Islands, cloudy, rain developing towards the evening. RNZ National. It's 8 minutes past 6.
And a footnote to the news, Susanna. Luca Jones, Luca Jones, she's through to the finals of the canoe slalom. So good
It's
news.
fantastic.
Fantastic news. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's been an emotional day for some West Coast residents as it becomes clear hundreds of people will be forced into long-term accommodation or will have to move altogether after devastating floods just over a week ago. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was with West Coast MP and Agriculture Minister Damien O'Connor in flood-hit Westport today, where at least 100 homes have been deemed unlivable. It's proved overwhelming for some, with authorities warning of a long clean-up ahead. Samantha G was there.
12-year-old Marai Aitchison is Westport Landsar's youngest volunteer. He's spent the day clearing out Westport homes wrecked by filthy floodwaters.
We've just been ripping our carpet, and we've also been helping people out, in case they need stuff moved out of their house that was still in there from the flood.
It's still raining in bursts in the town, just over a week after severe flooding forced hundreds of people from their homes. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the town's clearly taken a battering.
Even though you can see the enormous amount of work that has been done by the local community, you just see the sheer number of houses with those yellow and red stickers, and still people's possessions, so clearly damaged beyond repair, waiting on the side of the road to be taken away. It's devastating to see the impact it's had here.
More than 150 people are still in evacuation centres as authorities work through the risks posed by flood-hit homes. Ms Ardern today visited the red-stickered home of George and Dorothy Burrows in Gladstone Street. For one couple, losing their home was still too raw to talk about. Other than a watermark lining the walls and the unmistakable smell left behind by the floodwaters, their house is completely empty. District Mayor Jamie Klein says some locals are starting to run out of steam.
I think everyone is getting tired. We're into day 11 now of all of this. We held a public meeting last night, and a good turnout, and the mood of the people seem to be still quite positive. They feel as though they're getting the response and the support that they need. So that's just a matter of maintaining that communication and the ongoing effort.
Sue Walsh is the chairperson of Westport Land Search and Rescue and has been on the ground helping with the clean-up for the past 12 days. On her first day, she worked 15 hours, and now, almost 2 weeks later, it's a bit like Groundhog Day. She says the priority is still removing carpet from homes.
Some insurance companies have let people get their furniture out, but some not. So until assessors go through, some have to get their furniture out there, and we'll be assisting with that. Still carpet coming up in different places, and still getting people's rubbish and stuff and possessions out to the side of the road for waste management pickups.
Sue Walsh says many people need more than just practical help in the community.
There's a lot of needy people out there, and we are now finding people who have not come forward to get help. The neighbours are coming. We're finding people wrapped in a blanket. They don't know what to do. And we're also getting people coming here for just a little bit of TLC, as long as we feed them a cup of tea, chocolate biscuit, some soup, listen to them for a little bit, and that's helping them.
Jacinda Ardern says housing will be a critical issue for the district as it rebuilds. She says some temporary housing has already arrived, but it's not yet known how many people are ultimately displaced.
Obviously, we know the number of houses that are red stickered. Some of those yellow stickered homes are still working through whether or not they are uninhabitable for long periods of time, the level of water damage and the health risk that it presents. So I imagine over the coming days we'll get a better sense of what that housing gap is.
The government's activated enhanced Task Force Green in response to the flooding. Employment Minister Carmel Sepuloni says $500,000 will be made available to employ job seekers to help farmers and growers clean up their properties.
Let's head to Tokyo now, where whitewater paddler Luca Jones is on her way to the finals after just completing a strong run in the semi-finals of the K1 women's canoe slalom event. Jones won silver at the Rio de Janeiro Games and is hoping to add to her Olympic medal haul. Our reporter Maya Burry joins us from outside the Canoe Slalom Centre in Tokyo. Hi Maya, talk us through how it went.
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, a pretty strong performance from Jones there, comfortably making it into the finals. In these semis, there were 24 paddlers. Jones has come in at 5th place, and you needed to be in the top 10 to qualify. So just sitting in the middle of the pack there with a time of just over 108 seconds. A pretty tough course that these paddlers have been dealing with this afternoon. 25 gates to get through, 6 upstream ones, and we have seen some have quite a hard time with the course. So I'm sure Jones will be feeling very happy to be through to the finals and still in the contention for a medal.
Yeah, so what happens now then, Maya?
Well, just really a quick drinks break, really. In an hour's time, they'll be back on the water. Those top 10 will be having another run and a crack for that medal. So Jones will now just have a quick break. She'll probably be reviewing some of the footage to see how she went in that run and any tweaks that can be made before heading back out there. But she does have some tough competition. A very strong contender is Australia's Jessica Fox, who has come first in these semi-finals. So she's definitely one to watch.
And so what has been going on with other New Zealand athletes who've been in action today?
Well, there's been a lot of action in a lot of different fields and venues. Starting off with the triathlon that was first off this morning. It was actually, at the moment, it's really hot and sunny, but quite a rainy, miserable morning this morning. We had Ainsley Thorpe, who had a bit of a tough run in the triathlon. That those slippery conditions just she came off her bike in the first lap of the bike leg, so a tough day for her. And then we also had Nicole Vanderkay, who came in 29th place. But of course, the real talking point of the triathlon this morning was Flora Duffy from Bermuda, who came in first place, and Bermuda only a population of 60,000, so makes New Zealand seem quite large in the scale of things. Moving on to the rugby, the men's sevens are there through to the quarterfinals after a win against Australia this morning. And then another person through to the quarterfinals is heavyweight boxer David Nika. An interesting match with him this afternoon against Morocco's Yunus Bala. And there did appear to be a moment where Bala attempted to bite Nika. Nika speaking to Sky Sport afterwards, saying that he didn't manage to land that bite, but probably just got a mouthful full of sweat. So, yeah, that was an interesting one from today.
Not all went according to plan. Thanks, Maya. That's Maya Burry joining us live from Tokyo. And if you're interested, Luca Jones's final, well, that starts from 7 o'clock. It is 6:15. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. An angry kid to an angry youth and then angry adult sums up the life of Leota Scanlon. He's fronted up to the Royal Commission into Abuse in Care's Pacific hearing in South Auckland. Our reporter Andrew McRae is at the hearing.
Leota Scanlon's a survivor of Lake Alice's infamous child and adolescent unit in the 1970s. Sent there at 13, he was subjected to abuse masquerading as treatment, including injections of formaldehyde and electric shocks. He went to Lake Alice because he was fighting at school following the death of his mother when he was 11 and beatings from his father. After leaving Lake Alice, he took to drugs and alcohol to blot out the memories.
It didn't help me. The alcohol was blocking it. The drugs were blocking it, but at the end of the day, it always came back worse.
Now 58 years old, he says his own parenting skills have been affected.
The impact of Lake Alice brought me into adulthood where I didn't have proper relationships because I had no life skills, because there was no people there to give me that education, to give me those life skills that I needed. Because all they wanted to do when they looked at me was throw me the key and give me a needle and give him ECT, he'll be all right. He'll function.
Mr Scanlon says he's been angry since he was a kid.
It all comes down to that time when I was 11, when they could have just said, are you okay? Are you all right? You want to talk about it? And give me a hug. No one's ever given me that.
He says he still gets angry about the way he was treated at Lake Alice.
It does make me angry that these people could get away with what they did, you know. From what I know now and then, I would have tried to kill myself there, what they did to me and the other kids.
Mr Scanlon says those who ran Lake Alice must be held accountable.
What's happening to us then is happening now, but in a different way with other carers. They need to be screened, they need to, you know, be able to support these kids, young teenagers, young kids, so they don't go to places where, you know, it's not good.
The chair of the inquiry, Judge Coral Shaw, told Leota Scanlon the loss he suffered as a child and the subsequent time in state care was terrible and has had consequences.
On behalf of us all, so deeply sorry that you were so badly let down by so many agencies, your own family, the education system who turned you away when you tried to get an education, the justice system that locked you up, the police who bad-mouthed you and didn't see a troubled kid but a bad kid, the social welfare who should have been there caring for a child in need. There are probably more who let you down, but I want to say that we have heard what you've said. We've listened very carefully.
Leota Scanlon says he wants a formal and genuine apology from the government.
To the Netherlands now, where COVID infection rates climbed by more than 500% after the scrapping of almost all restrictions. That included the reopening of nightclubs in late June. But the surge in infections prompted an equally swift U-turn. The BBC's Anna Holligan reports.
We make Dutch electronic synth pop, and it's awesome.
We're inside Pip. It's a dark, industrial, warehouse-style nightclub on the outskirts of The Hague. Boaz, in his 90s-style shell suit, and the Gold Band Boys were hoping this would be their breakthrough year.
We had like 70 shows, and they all got cancelled, and that was a big bummer. I already told my girlfriend I was going to pay the rent.
But with the venues closed, there's been nowhere for them to play and no audience to buy tickets to cover those bills. Earlier this month, right after the Cabinet relaxed the rules, the infection rate shot up by 500%, resulting in a rapid backpedalling. The nightclubs have been closed again until at least the 13th of August. Stephen van Lummel, who owns this nightclub, believes the under-30s are being used as scapegoats by a state that keeps on changing direction.
The first thing that pops in my mind is that it's so remarkable and unbelievable that they put such an amount of pressure on youth. I mean, youth have been unable to interact with each other for 1.5 years.
The Dutch health minister was criticised for encouraging young people to get the single-shot Janssen vaccine and go partying, with the slogan, "Dancing with Janssen," despite the medical recommendation to wait 2 weeks to build up maximum immunity.
The government is saying as soon as you get one shot, you can dance with Jans, and that's just crazy. I mean, if you tell youth that you can go out and you're going out and then you're being punished for going out, that's just unbelievable to me. And so that's very hard on us, on young people.
Quite a high percentage of infections were traced back to nightclubs. There were like 6 super spreader events at clubs, a festival as well where there were like 1,000 infections. How do you actually reopen? How are you planning to reopen when it's finally allowed again?
I mean, one of the first things that we decided is that we are not going to be opening in panic.
With the Delta variant spreading and hospital admissions climbing, much of the Netherlands has turned the deepest shade of red on the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control map. The Dutch Health Minister Hugo de Jonge has admitted the rush to restore freedom at home may have resulted in less of it abroad.
It is fair to say that increasing infection rates could have consequences for the extent to which we are welcome in other European countries.
As the cables are cleared away around us, the Gold Band boys tell me they're desperate to get back to live shows. But they're urging the politicians to act with caution.
I think the best thing they could have done was just keep it closed and keep it more strict and not just throw everything open. So that we could just, when the time was right, we could really start again. We're really in that live energy, as you can tell.
The night will be ours.
Stained glass windows of the Canterbury Cathedrals in England may be among the oldest in the world, according to new research. The panels have been redated using a new device by scientists. The BBC's Caleb Ghosh reports.
Canterbury Cathedral is among the oldest churches in England. Inside, its stunning windows depict symbolic religious scenes. This series was thought to have been made in the 13th century, but some of the panels, including this one of the Prophet Nathan, have now been redated. For decades, historians have thought that some of these panels were made earlier than the others because they're different in style. Now, using a new technique, scientists have confirmed that not only are they much older, but they may well be among the oldest in the world. It's only come to light now because of this device called a windowlizer. It may not look like much, but it was developed by scientists to be used on location without damaging the glass. It shines a beam onto the surface, which causes the material inside to radiate. This radiation contains a chemical fingerprint from which the researchers worked out its age.
We've been working on this detective story for some time, putting all the pieces in place, and then we finally get an answer, something new, that brings together science and art into one story. It's fantastic.
These are all stories that were recorded at the time they happened here.
The discovery has astonished Leonie Seliger, who looks after the stained glass windows here. She believes that the redated panels could go back to the mid-1100s and were in place during great historical events at the cathedral, including the assassination of the then Archbishop Thomas Becket, who features in many of these windows.
They would have witnessed the murder of Thomas Becket. They would have witnessed Henry II come on his knees begging for forgiveness. They would have witnessed the conflagration of the fire that devoured the cathedral in 1174. And then they would have witnessed all of British history.
The cathedral contains a story of England's history, its artistry and its religious thinking. Now, a new scientific discovery has given us a fresh perspective on the nation's past.
Pink has offered to pay for the Norwegian women's beach handball team's fine for breaking uniform rules. The team owes €1,500 for wearing shorts rather than bikini bottoms. It's sparked howls of protest on social media decrying the sexualisation of women's athletes. The BBC's Rachel Wright has more.
Every sport has governing bodies that police their dress codes. In this case, it would seem that the rules are particularly strict in the world of beach handball. The Norwegian women's team had made repeated complaints about having to wear skimpy pants rather than the shorts worn by their male counterparts. But the International Handball Federation insisted that the bikini bottoms must have a close fit with a side depth of no more than 10 centimetres. So the women were fined for wearing shorts, and Twitter lit up with women protesting. It's certainly not the first time a sport has policed women's bodies. At the 2012 London Olympics, the Badminton World Federation tried to force female players to wear skirts in order to look feminine and have a nice presentation. And just last week, Olivia Breen, a British Paralympian, told the media that a female official called her athletic briefs inappropriate, in this case, too short. She's complained to England Athletics. But this year's Tokyo Olympics has seen huge efforts by the organisers to promote women's sports. For the first time, nearly half of the athletes are women. All countries were encouraged to select as many women as possible, including those traditionally dominated by men.
My name is Bashar Al-Manouri. I am from Qatar. I am sprinter in athletics games. I am so happy to be here in Tokyo to show Qatar have girls players.
It's interesting that while the women's beach handball has incurred the wrath of many by insisting on skimpy bikini bottoms, its sister federation, that governs volleyball, has relaxed its rules to allow players to wear hijabs in a bid to make the sport more welcoming. The lesson from it all? Some great strides forward and a few steps back.
Right, let's get to some of your feedback before we head off. Now, this rubbish really has you talking. The super city with two different systems. Some people have to tag their rubbish, others pay with their rates and their bins just get picked up. But someone else has entered into the race. This one from a rural listener. Have been listening to the rubbish debate with interest about whether to tag or not to tag and so on. But 10 years on, Auckland still forgets that Rodney is part of Auckland and we have rubbish bags, which we have to pay for. Indeed, being at a rural address also involves a drive of 1.5 to 2 kilometres to drop the rubbish bag at the main road. The state of the road is certainly a disincentive to filling the rubbish bag and needing to take a drive out, but that's a tale for another day. Others say tag system is a user pay system. We put out one 80-litre bin a month, a lot cheaper than a flat charge lumped into rates. Tags encourage habit change on what gets sent to the landfill. Interesting point. Another person says people who criticise or who practice conservation benefit from the tags on bins. Consequently, everyone benefits. It's no big deal organising to buy them. In this one, we live in a no-ticket area. Big problem for us is other locals and passers-by filling our bin. I don't want to pay for someone else's junk, this person says. And one rubbish system for all the city. Another listener says it should be the rates bill method. A, it is cheaper for both council and customers, and B, it is most convenient. Governments need to stop using added inconvenience as a tool instead of improving service. On the subject of the Wallabies, fairness and transparency is one thing, but how does 20 million of income for the Wallabies visit stack up against the potential financial losses of the Delta variant if we have to lock down? Now, ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Popo on First Up from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. They'll have the latest on Luca Jones's race, and that is 7:15 if you want to tune in for her run, and we'll be back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Police Commissioner says an attempted murder trial has been a brutal reminder of the potential danger officers face every day. Housing is identified as a critical issue for Westport as it rebuilds from severe flooding. Exporters struggling to get critical workers say they are disappointed that the Wallabies rugby team has been granted MIQ exemptions to enter the country on economic grounds. Rio silver medalist Luca Jones makes the K1 canoe slalom final in Tokyo. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
My view personally is that these people should be brought home, and then if investigated